She said she wasn't in a rush to get married, but she already had the dress. I found it by accident, like most of the truths that unravel everything do. One quiet Sunday morning, I went looking for an old phone charger in her closet. She was out for brunch with friends, and I figured it would be a 2-minute search. I wasn't snooping. I didn't even think twice. But when I reached behind the storage box, I felt something soft, sealed in a heavy plastic cover, carefully hung and pressed. First, I thought it might be a winter coat, but then I unzipped just a little, and the ivory lace spilled into view. Elegant, expensive, and absolutely unmistakable. A wedding dress stopped me cold. Not because we hadn't talked about marriage. We had. Many times. She always said she wasn't ready yet. Said she wanted to feel stable first, grow her career, travel more. I respected that. I believed her. I thought when the time came we'd go pick everything out together. But this wasn't a maybe. This was a decision already made. A moment already imagined, just not with me in it. Still, I didn't panic. I tried to reason through it. Maybe it was old. Maybe it belonged to a family member. Maybe she just liked the look of it and bought it impulsively years ago. I told myself a lot of stories in those next few minutes, desperate to choose the one that hurt the least. And then I saw the folder. It was tucked beside the garment bag, half hidden behind a stack of shoeboxes. Plain manila, tied with string. I opened it, expecting to find receipts or dry cleaning tags. What I found instead were full invoices from a high-end bridal boutique, dated just 3 weeks ago. There were handwritten notes attached, fabric swatches, fitting schedules, and at the top on every single page was a name. It wasn't mine. I stood there for what felt like hours, reading and rereading those pages, as if some detail might shift if I looked hard enough, as if my name might suddenly appear where his was, and this whole thing would make sense again. But the truth was right there in black ink again and again. The man she was planning this future with wasn't me. I don't remember putting everything back. I don't remember walking out of the room or sitting down on the edge of the bed. I just remember the sound of the front door opening 20 minutes later and her voice calling out like everything was normal. I didn't say a word that day, or the next. Something in me shut off. Not in rage, not in bitterness, but in something colder. Final. Like when you flip a light switch and realize the bulb's been dead for a long time. I watched her move through the apartment like nothing had changed. She made dinner, laughed at her phone, kissed my cheek before bed. And I played along because I needed time to understand how long she'd been gone from us, emotionally, mentally, while still showing up in the shell of a partner. I started watching the small things more closely. The texts she didn't answer when I was nearby. The calls she took in the bathroom with the water running. The way she never mentioned the future anymore unless I did first. She wasn't slipping away. She'd already left. And now, I could see it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Some people want dramatic fights, tears, confessions. But not me. I wanted to see how far she'd take it, how deep the lie went. Because if you're going to leave me out of your future, I want to watch you try to fake the present first. A few days after I found the dress and the receipts, she told me she was planning a weekend trip with her cousin to a vineyard 2 hours out of town. It was one of those stories so casually delivered, so perfectly timed between bites of dinner, that it had to be rehearsed. She said her cousin needed advice about a guy, that it would just be a couple of days to disconnect, that she'd be back Sunday evening. I nodded, not because I believed her, but because I wanted to see how easily the lie came to her lips. She smiled, grateful for my apparent trust, and reached for my hand across the table. I held it, but it didn't feel like her hand anymore. It felt like something borrowed, something no longer mine. That Friday, she packed light. An overnight bag, makeup kit, 2 dresses, and her favorite earrings. She kissed me goodbye with the same affection I'd grown used to, the kind that looked real to anyone watching from the outside. I watched her leave like someone watching a play, knowing the ending but waiting for the performance to collapse anyway. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind her, I opened her laptop. I didn't need to guess her password. I'd helped her set it up when we bought the thing. What I was looking for wasn't scandalous. I wasn't hoping for photos or love letters. I just wanted confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. That the dress, the name on the receipt, the silence between us, none of it was paranoia. I wanted something definitive. It didn't take long. She hadn't even bothered to delete the calendar entries properly. There it was, a shared event titled Engagement Dinner, Final Walkthrough, scheduled for Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Location: a private hall inside one of the city's luxury hotels. I clicked on the notes. Dress delivery 5:15 p.m. Confirm cake detail with hotel. Call florist Re. Table arrangements. Remind M. to bring the ring early. I leaned back in the chair, breathing slow, controlled, steady. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was coordination. A whole evening, a whole performance, with my absence not only expected but required. And there it was, that final, simple fact. She wasn't cheating on me. She wasn't figuring herself out. She was engaged to someone else, planning a celebration that I was never meant to know about. I was the placeholder in the meantime, the background character, the safe space she could retreat to while building a life behind a curtain I was never supposed to pull back. I closed the laptop, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. I stared out the window for a long time, watching the traffic lights change. Red to green, green to yellow, yellow back to red. Everything was still moving. The city hadn't stopped for my heartbreak. It never does. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I simply accepted that the person I loved no longer existed. Or maybe she never had. Maybe the version I loved was just a reflection of my own hope, what I wanted her to be, not what she truly was. I spent that weekend in quiet preparation. I packed a single bag, clothes, a few books, my passport, though I didn't have plans to go anywhere. I canceled my part of the lease online. I booked a temporary rental under my own name and turned off location services on all my devices. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my family, not even her, because this wasn't an exit born from drama. This was subtraction, clean, uncomplicated, irrevocable. When Sunday came, I didn't wait for her to come back. I knew she wouldn't. She'd be at her walkthrough, posing for photos in the dress I'd already seen, standing beside a man whose name I had read over and over in cursive script across boutique receipts and email confirmations. She had her ending, but so did I. Sunday evening arrived like a slow, heavy tide, quiet and inevitable. I sat alone in the apartment, lights off, the faint hum of traffic outside filtering through the windows. Her absence was the loudest thing in the room. There was no message, no check-in. Not even the obligatory "made it back safe" she used to send after other trips. But I didn't need it this time. I knew where she was. I knew what she was wearing. And I knew that while the room she was standing in probably smelled like expensive flowers and candle wax, the foundation under it all was already cracked. At exactly 6:30 p.m., I closed the door behind me and left the apartment for the last time. No ceremony. No suitcase. Just a slim leather bag over my shoulder with everything I truly needed. A quiet exit from a life that had quietly excluded me long before I opened that closet door. The building's hallway was empty, the elevator quiet as it slid down to the lobby. Outside, the evening was warm and still, the kind of soft weather that should have felt like peace. I walked without looking back, without rushing. I didn't know where she was in that moment. Whether she was slipping on her heels backstage, practicing the way she'd look surprised when the ring came out, or laughing with her friends who all knew more than I did. But it didn't matter, because wherever she was, whatever she was doing, I was done being part of the lie. I checked into the short-term rental I'd reserved. It was small, simple, white walls, light wood, no photographs. No traces of anyone else's life. It was a place for beginning, not remembering. I dropped my bag, sat down on the edge of the bed, and exhaled. Not a sigh of relief, just breath. Full, deep, uninterrupted. The kind of breath I hadn't taken in months. Over the next few days, I went completely dark. No texts, no emails, no posts. I disconnected every shared account, changed every password, closed every joint subscription. Not out of spite, but to reclaim my digital space the way I'd already reclaimed my physical one. She hadn't noticed yet, I was sure of it. She was too busy living in the story she had built, too swept up in the version of life where I didn't exist. I didn't intend to ruin it for her. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't showing up at the hotel, interrupting speeches, or crashing the celebration. I was simply removing myself so thoroughly that when she finally noticed I was gone, it would be too late to trace the moment I left. A week passed. Then two. I heard nothing. And then, out of nowhere, a message. Not from her. It was from a mutual friend. One of the few who had been close to both of us. Someone who always tried to stay neutral, even when the cracks were starting to show. His text was cautious. Hey, not sure if you've heard, but she had some kind of breakdown at a dinner party last night. Someone brought up engagements and she just lost it. Said things she couldn't take back. I didn't reply. He followed up. She asked where you were. I didn't say anything, but she looked shaken, like it just hit her. I sat with that message for a while. Read it again and again. Not because it made me feel better, but because it confirmed something I hadn't let myself believe until that moment. She really thought I'd stay. Even after everything. Even after finding the dress, the receipts, the plans that didn't include me. She had convinced herself I would be there. Waiting. Filling the space she left behind. But I wasn't her safety net anymore. I wasn't her placeholder. And the silence she got from me wasn't an invitation to explain. It was an answer. The next morning, I received another message. This time from her. No greeting. No preamble. Just, where are you? I didn't respond. Then, another, can we talk? I put my phone down and went outside. The sun was climbing across the buildings, slow and bright. I walked through the quiet streets of a neighborhood that had never known her name, breathing in the possibility of a life without apologies, without half-truths, without wondering who I was to someone who had already chosen someone else. I didn't need her explanation. I didn't need to hear the excuses, or the story she would tell to make it all seem softer, less intentional. Because the truth was never accidental. It was documented in emails and schedules and fittings she planned behind my back. And just like that, for the first time in years, I felt weightless. By the time the fourth message came in, this time a voicemail, I didn't even feel the urge to press play. I watched it land, saw her name flash across the top of the screen, and simply let it sit there. Her voice was no longer something I longed to hear. It was just a sound I used to associate with warmth, back when I believed in the stories she told. Now, it was nothing more than an echo from a version of life I no longer belonged to. She began texting every evening. Not constant, not frantic, just steady. A simple line here, a question there. Are you okay? Can we meet? I need to explain. It was strange, really. How the woman who had once so carefully constructed an entire life without me now needed me to validate her grief. But I wasn't going to give her that, because it wasn't grief she was feeling. It was consequence. And those aren't the same. Eventually, I muted her number, not blocked, just quieted. Let the words pile up unread while I focused on things that mattered. I went back to writing, something I hadn't touched in months. I caught up with friends, ones I hadn't really spoken to since she and I started drifting apart. I relearned the feel of silence in the mornings, the kind not filled with tension or tiptoeing around moods. I slept better, ate better, laughed harder. The further I got from her voice, the clearer mine became. Then came the package. No name on the return label, just our old address scribbled on the front. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Still, curiosity isn't something you shut off completely. Inside was a small, white envelope, and beneath it, something wrapped in soft tissue. I opened the envelope first. A short handwritten note. I didn't know how else to say I'm sorry. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just 5 words that arrived too late. I unfolded the tissue. It was the receipt. The one from the bridal boutique. But this one had been altered. The name at the top, the one that had gutted me weeks ago, was scratched out. A faint line drawn through it, and below, written in pen, was my name. My full name. In her handwriting. I stared at it for a long time, not because it moved me, but because it confirmed everything I already knew. She had tried to rewrite history. Not by admitting what she'd done, but by editing it after the fact, hoping I'd see it and think maybe I'd misunderstood everything from the beginning. But I hadn't. This wasn't remorse. It was revision. And I didn't need a rewritten receipt to remember who I'd been to her. A backup plan. A man who would have worn a tux, stood beside her in photos, and smiled through vows that were meant for someone else. I put the paper down and stepped outside, letting the box sit on the table. The sky was overcast, wind stirring the leaves along the sidewalk. There was a couple walking ahead of me, laughing over coffee, the kind of effortless joy I once thought we had. But the difference now was that I didn't envy them. I didn't ache. I was simply separate, watching life from my own vantage point again, no longer tethered to someone else's script. I deleted her messages by then. Not all at once, but slowly, one by one. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I just didn't need them. They weren't part of my life anymore. They were part of the version she wanted me to remember, one that never really existed outside of her convenience. When people asked what happened, I didn't give them the long version. I just said, it ended when I realized I wasn't supposed to be part of the beginning, and that was enough. The truth is, there's no closure when someone lies with a smile. There's no neat ending to betrayal dressed in white lace and planned speeches. There's just the decision to stop waiting for answers from someone who was never asking the right questions. And so I chose to begin fully, finally, without her. Months have passed since the last message. I never replied. I never met her for coffee, never allowed her a moment to rewrite the ending in her favor. Some might say that's cold, that I owed her a chance to explain. But you don't owe closure to someone who built their future on your absence. You don't owe conversation to someone who rehearsed a wedding without you even knowing she'd accepted another proposal. What she wanted was forgiveness dressed as dialogue. What she needed was understanding without truth. But what I gave her, what I gave myself, was distance. It's incredible how different the world feels when you no longer carry someone else's weight on your shoulders. I no longer wake up trying to interpret silence. I no longer watch her social media for signs of regret or reinvention. I don't flinch at the mention of weddings. I don't feel that sharp twist in my chest when I see a dress in a storefront. All those things she took with her, my trust, my time, my faith in what we had, they no longer haunt me. They're just gone. I've started something new, quietly, slowly, carefully. I don't tell this person everything about my past. Not yet. But I don't lie either. When they ask why my last relationship ended, I say, she chose a life I wasn't part of, and I chose not to beg for a place in it. That's all. It's enough. They nod. They understand. And that's the first sign of healing I've felt in a long time. Not just that I've moved on, but that someone else can see me for who I am now, not the broken version I was left as. There are still moments, unexpected ones. A song, a street, the sound of a laugh that almost sounds like hers. But they pass. They don't linger the way they used to. They don't drag me back into that dark place where love felt like convincing someone to choose you daily. I've stopped writing her name in my mind. I've stopped editing the past to soften the blow. The truth stands as it is. I loved someone who was preparing a life without me in it. And instead of collapsing, I walked away. The people who knew us both still occasionally bring her up, carefully, as if testing the temperature of old wounds. I make it easy for them. I smile and say, we were never what we looked like, because we weren't. We were polished, polite, photogenic, and quietly unraveling from the inside out. The only real thing left was my decision to stop pretending. Sometimes I wonder what she tells people now. Whether she says I left without warning. Whether she paints me as distant, unreachable, cold. I'm sure her version has missing pieces, selective edits. But that's fine. Let her keep the story where she's the one surprised by my absence. I don't need to defend myself in a narrative I no longer inhabit. And if she ever really wonders why I didn't show up that night, why I didn't crash her engagement or demand answers, the truth is simple. I wanted her to see the empty space where I used to be and realize it was the only honest thing left. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't shouting or fighting or proving how hurt you are. Sometimes the most powerful thing is leaving, without a trace, and letting your absence say what words never could. If you've ever been forgotten by the person you loved, if you've ever found proof that your name had been replaced long before you even knew there was another option, I want you to know that walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. And if this story hit you somewhere personal, somewhere honest, then leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your version, your voice. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because stories like these aren't just mine. They're all of ours. And you're not alone.